it comes before the board anyway.
Well, to be clear, it'll be administrative review, so we'll be reviewing that within our
yes.
administrative capacity
My
instead of to the
mistake.
board. But again, if you have any questions, just let me know. The next update is on the Brayburn subdivision. Mr. Trelli is the abutter who had concerns about drainage and has been in for several meetings. So just wanted to let you know that there has been ongoing review and discussion. There is an additional engineer, Steve Keach, has been retained and to help navigate and come up with the design solution. Right now, it's my understanding that the issues are being worked out between the parties. There is, positive movement forward towards addressing Mr. Torelli's concerns, and so that looks like it's being resolved. So Mr. Torelli didn't see any need to be here this evening. They are continuing to work on that, and Steve Keach is helping to navigate that solution along with John Trottier and Eric Mitchell's office. The next item I have, I told you there was a lot of discussions with staff. Just for your information only, Auto Auction, which is located down near Exit 4, has approached staff. They are looking to do a temporary tent on the property, something that's going to be there for, they're estimating maybe 60 to 90 days. The purpose of the tent is going to be, it'll be located behind their current intake building, and they're looking to use it as a trial run to see about, as you know, most dealerships now do a lot of online sales, do kind of 360-degree photography. Before Auto Auction invests in and going through site plan approval process for a new building, they want to test this out with a tent with drop walls. It's something that the building and fire code do not consider a permanent structure. It's a temporary structure based on the limited amount of time that it's going to be there. It doesn't fall under site plan purview, but wanted to just bring it to the board's attention that it will be there for an extended period of time. It'll need to meet all fire and building code, emergency egress and lighting. And if it's successful, then I do expect that they'll be coming in the future with a site plan request for a permanent structure that they would be building, not a tent, but an actual, physical structure for the purpose of taking photos of vehicles that are coming on site. With the way that the times have changed, and I think from a marketing perspective, online sales are the way things are now, and so they're testing this out.
So this is like a photo booth,
Exactly, just a real big photo booth for cars.
Have the TVs new? Have the TVs always been here?
TVs are new.
Wait a second.
We don't get the widescreen action,
Yeah.
I like it.
That wasn't part of discussion, though.
Sorry.
An observation.
The next item, as the board recalls, back in November, you approved a conditional use permit for Eversource for work associated. Thanks, Laura. For a conditional use permit for work in the wetland buffers associated with maintenance and pole replacement program. So the total impact of that conditional use permit was 648,330 square feet in the buffer. The applicant is being very cognizant and careful with their work, and they have identified 3 to 4 additional poles that are going to be relocated. That is a total of 49 square feet of additional impact on top of the 648,000 square feet that have been approved. So just letting the board know this as an information item. If anyone has questions or concerns, this type of very minor change is something that could happen during the course of construction, but just wanted to bring it to the board's attention since their engineer had raised it and let us know, just passing that along as an information item. The next, I will pull up, you have on the screen in front of you something labeled Max. And this is, again, just getting some input and concurrence from the board. So as the board knows, Max Apples has their existing ice cream shed, for lack of a better term, that back in 1991 received a special exception from the ZBA. There's never been any site plan review or approval required for this as an agricultural use. Received proper approvals from the ZBA and went ahead with the addition. They are looking to make some changes. What they're looking at right now is a minor expansion, maybe a couple of feet in either direction of the ice cream shed itself and raising the roof line. This is going to require, is currently laid out, going back to the ZBA to amend their special exception because the footprint is a little bit bigger and the roof is a little bit higher. It's typically not something that we would have. Typically, architectural elevations and changes would go to the planning board or could rise to the level of site plan review by the planning board. But in this case, because it's a minor modification, there was never an original site plan approval. It was handled through the ZBA. We think it's best to be continued to handle through the ZBA process. But I did just want to bring the elevations to the board's attention and see if anyone had any questions or concerns. As I said, with the current layout and presentation, there will be a public hearing process at the ZBA for approval of this. So if anyone does have concerns, they can bring those at that point. But overall, I think it's, they're trying to improve the aesthetic of what the shed is out there.
Any questions from the board?
I just have one question if I
Yep.
could. Does the roof line improvements and elevations, which I think look nice,
Yep.
is that also, because it looks like a flat roof on the old barn,
Yeah, so
are they coming up too?
what they're proposing to do right now is just the shed and the roof line of the shed. This, what's shown here, is a potential future. They may come in the future with wanting to raise the roof line of the rest of the barn and make those alterations. When you compare it, that elevation versus, the existing, you can see the remainder of that farm market. They're not altering that right now, but they're showing it on the rendering because they are trying to get a full picture of what their future plans are. The only portion that we're talking about at this point is just this ice cream barn section alone.
Thank you.
Definitely improvement over what's there, but what is there is from the ZBA approval.
It looks great. They'll have a lot more space in there too.
All right. And I was just handed an additional regional impact determination. So as my final item, a crack team here on top of getting things. So we do have one more regional impact determination if the board will allow me, which is an application for design review of a site plan amendment for the construction of a 7,500 square foot 2-story building addition and associated site improvements. This is Orchard Christian Fellowship Church at 136 Pillsbury Road, map 6, lot 18-2, zoned AR1. Orchard Christian Fellowship is the owner and the applicant on that project. So because it does not meet any of the criteria of the Southern New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission, staff recommends that the board find this is not development of regional impact.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that this does not meet the criteria for regional impact.
Second?
motion by Al, second by Jake. Any discussion by the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Abstentions, chair is affirmative, and motion carries. So we have 2 regional impacts we've
Thank you.
made a decision on.
Thank you, Laura, for being on top of that.
Yeah.
So that's all that I have for discussions with staff. I think that's enough for one evening, but happy to entertain
You
other
kept us-
questions from the
kept us
board.
busy here. It just has several things, and then I'm gonna move up the election of offices, the CIP committee appointments, the Heritage Commission appointments. As Jake's gonna have to leave a little earlier because he has to work. It looks like plenty to do outside.
Yep.
New Hampshire Planning and Zoning Spring Conference, emails have gone out to register for this. Getting tied up here, my feet. It's two sessions. I think they're both the same thing.
I believe that they are 2 separate, I don't know what the format is, and if it's
Yeah,
different sessions
But
on
I
the
know
different Saturday
there's a
mornings.
planning board track and a
Yes.
ZBA track for it.
Yes.
So, planning board can see what's going on the ZBA side of things. But it's virtual, it'll be online, no cost to the, planning board members, ZBA members. Let's see, registration opens the 28th of March. So I'll find the email, I'll send it out again just to remind everyone. Also, the Office of State Planning is having their noontime seminar on St. Patrick's Day, the 17th of March. That's at 12 p.m. Usually goes from 12 to 1 or 1:30. They're very, very informative anyway on recent developments and what's happening. And there's usually a lot of other planning board members on there, or especially planners like Colleen and Laura, that have some good insightful input also. So the New Hampshire Planning Commission is doing a housing assessment needs survey. So I've sent emails out on this previously. I think there was something from the the Office of Planning and Development on that. And also, if you just go to the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission website, on the left side, you click on that, and it's a needs assessment you can take there. So a lot of information is needed by the commission, and they would like to hear from everyone, really. So this is the time to get your input in, how you feel about the housing needs. So, let's see, that's it. We'll move to election of officers.
Could I say something first?
Oh, certainly.
I've asked Colleen to print me out the new planning book.
Yes.
I'm sure if anyone else wanted that in print, instead of having to scroll down the whole hundreds of pages of PDF, she'd be happy to do that.
Yep, just let Laura and I know, we'll make sure we get copies printed.
Was that the pack, the
The,
small
the
pack?
planning handbook that Laura emailed last
Yeah.
week, yep, we can print that for you.
Email, oh, to others.
We, it was published last week, it's what Jeff
Oh,
said.
okay, yeah, that one,
Yep.
okay.
Yep, so if you need a copy of it, just let us know.
Yeah, it's online, you can
And a
have a
new
hard
binder.
copy also.
Well, if you need a binder, we can.
I'm fine,
Oh,
I got one
So
today.
Laura's thinking ahead. Thank you, Laura.
I'd like to have one of those.
It's
Sure.
just one? Give it to him then.
Yeah,
Give it to Roger.
yeah, there's
Here,
some,
give this
you
one
got
to Al
yours?
then.
No, you keep it. I'll
Yep,
pick
we'll
one
print
up from
extras.
Colin.
Oh, all right.
Al,
Yeah, it's a
I
good,
can give him this one if you
good
want.
nighttime reading after a planning board meeting.
Read it before the planning board, so it gives you some pro tips and pointers.
Yeah, it's trying to like read the statutes, you like this all of a sudden. Okay, election of officers. We have chair, vice chair, secretary, and assistant secretary. So if anyone wants to run for any of them, I'll accept a motion, but the other alternative is if the board is content with the current complement of officers, I'll take a motion that we move the current slate for the ensuing year.
Mr. Chair, could I make a motion to move the current set of officers to the next
Next
cycle
season.
here? Yeah,
Second.
next season.
Okay, motion by Jake for the current slate of officers to continue. Jeff did the second. Any discussion by the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Abstentions? And the chair votes affirmative. Next we have is appointments to the Capital Improvements Committee, and Jeff has sent an email to myself and Colleen, and Jake has informed me that he is interested. I didn't know if we had any other volunteers. I hadn't heard from anyone else. So if the board is comfortable with
How many members do we normally put on it?
2 from the planning board.
Mr. Chairman, so move for Jeff and Jake to
Second that,
be
Mr.
appointed for capital improvement committee.
Motion by Al, second by Lynn, and that's Jake and Jeff on the planning board members to the Capital Improvements Committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Abstentions, chair is affirmative, and motion carries. And Jeff and Jake are, they usually meet, I think, in August.
There's usually a kickoff meeting that's all of 10 minutes long in
Select
in
officers.
June, just to select officers. We'll circulate information for any project requests in the June, July timeframe, and there'll be, maybe a meeting in July, maybe one meeting in August. Usually wraps up pretty quickly. We try to get everything, the committee's work done, so that way it can get before the planning board by September, October, and have a published document for council and the budget committee in time for the budget cycle next year, so. It'll be lots of fun.
I don't think there's gonna be much on the town side, so. Okay, then we need a liaison for the Heritage Commission. That is one, a planning board member has to be a member of the Heritage Commission, and there's only could be one That's myself, so, by statute.
Do we have to vote on that?
You can vote on it.
Okay. I'll make the motion.
I'll make the
Now
second.
for myself to be on the liaison, do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Jake. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Abstentions, chair votes affirmative, and motion carries. Now we can get into our poultry discussion.
Waiting all month for this. So after last month's discussion and the consensus of the board was sort of allowing poultry in general, but looking for additional guidance from New Hampshire Cooperative Extension regarding, number of birds, different restrictions on different type of species. The input that we got from Cooperative Extension was basically that the number of birds they're recommending and really held up across any poultry species, with the exception being turkeys. So they did, as a rule of thumb, recommend that on a lot that's between 1 to 2 acres in size, 12 poultry other than turkeys was a reasonable number. So that could be hens, that could be broilers, that could be, other species, ducks. And that 12 birds was kind of a good number for household consumption on that 1 to 2 acre lot size. And hearing from the board also wanting sort of a tiered approach. We also then established numbers for a lot between half acre and 1 acre in size, with no more than 6 birds other than turkeys, and no turkeys on those smaller lot sizes. On the 1 to 2 acres, no more than 6 turkeys seem to be a good estimate from Cooperative Extension on what's reasonable for household consumption. Maybe on the higher side of 6 turkeys, but they thought seemed reasonable for that lot size. We did update language to make it clear that enclosures, and so the square footage of coop versus enclosed outdoor area, the minimum square footage, but then also clarifying the enclosures, meaning the outdoor enclosure area needs to be contained, roofed. So roof meaning acceptable to be wire, mesh, or chicken wire, other, just so that way the birds are contained and are not flying and trespassing on other property, if you will. So one point brought up, there was an oversight of mine. Art, thank you for reminding me that Al had suggested last month, clarifying that at no time on public nuisance, including vermin in there, that vermin should not cause a public nuisance associated that interfere with property owners' rights. So we're going to insert that word in there to make sure that vermin is not a problem. And Lynn also brought up, there had been a discussion last month about geese and if geese should just be on the no-go list. So I guess I'd look for the board. I believe last month it was sort of, and Cooperative Extension didn't have any guidelines or sentiment one way or the other on geese. So right now we sort of have them lumped. They'd be considered under poultry and would be allowed. If you want, we can add there's no roosters permitted. We can say no geese are permitted if the noise and size of a goose is a concern of the board. So those are the changes we made from last month. I think it's more permissive, but is also ensuring or helping to limit the potential impact on abutting property owners. And we do recognize, and code enforcement is aware that with this, if this is adopted, there could be phone calls from neighbors complaining about, my neighbor has a chicken and has a turkey, and it's too loud. There's smell. There's going to be enforcement complaints, and that's just part of managing these things, but wanting to allow people the option to do this on their smaller parcels.
The one thing that I would be careful of is guinea fowl,
Okay.
because guinea fowl are louder than a fire truck siren. Seriously, they are. Yeah, I don't think the neighbors would appreciate that. I don't think the landowner would appreciate that.
I had some concerns about the geese also being nasty and loud.
Yes.
And my
So-
question was on the noise from the geese, but
Yeah.
they're aggressive animals too. So-
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's why I had
You get hissed
concerns.
over, you get too close to them. They come right at you.
I had a question with regards to C and D. Does that apply to the way I'm looking at this, it looks like it's applies to everything under livestock now.
It does, but that's how the current ordinance is written. Those C and D are, with the exception of, we're gonna insert vermin in C, but that comes right from the current ordinance and currently applies to livestock over 2 acres.
Okay, so, you didn't insert here in the, doesn't affect the current, anything over 2 acres, you could still have geese or.
Anything over 2 acres, you can still have geese. So if I put no geese and no guinea fowl, we would include that probably in,
Okay, so that was just an
yeah.
alteration that you had changed C and D because you inserted B.
because I inserted B, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Right now, there's already the restriction on commercial piggeries and mink farms. That's existing language.
So I could just have a technical question. When they go to enforce it, if somebody says, well, there's a public nuisance because they raise llamas or whatever, but, you know, they have the right to raise llamas, but is it just because they don't like it and they don't like I mean, where do you draw the line between?
So it in New Hampshire and in Londonderry, I mean, agriculture is protected and permitted, and so unless and I think public nuisance, and this is the public nuisance is, you know, also on the lots larger than 2 acres, you truly need to prove that there is. I guess I'd look to, you know, several years ago when there was an issue with goats that were out on the highways and in the roads and were causing truly a public nuisance. And that was an issue that had to be addressed. I think that just the sights and smells of a farm, it does not constitute a public nuisance. And that outside of our ordinance is very well protected in New Hampshire statute. So I think that there are other protections on agriculture there. And it is an interpretation of the code enforcement officer to determine, is this someone who's just complaining because they don't like that their neighbor has a llama, or is this, you know, truly something that is a nuisance?
Would it be better to add something in there that says outside of the norm? Because look, I might be appalled at the sight of a llama, and I'm saying it's creating a public nuisance to me because I don't like the way they look.
Yeah, I think that it's better handled by code enforcement, where you would need to file a complaint and you would need to demonstrate to code enforcement how that is a public nuisance. And code enforcement would, you know, coordinate with the police department if necessary, would, you know, review, would consult. I think for us to try to define it here, that language has been working in the ordinance up till this point, so I wouldn't change that.
Yeah, I would just hate to see somebody's pet llama. I'd hate to see something where
Yeah.
somebody got into an altercation or disagreement on something else, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm going to go through and.
Yeah, no, that's where code enforcement, I think, does a good job at vetting and understanding what is this a, you know, neighbor issue versus if your llama left your property, went on your neighbor's property and bit them. Oh, okay, we've got an issue here. You're not containing your llama properly. But, you know, I think code enforcement needs to be able to make that determination. They have the latitude to do that.
Yeah, plus code enforcement knows what neighbors are doing, you know, usually within the neighborhood, they know where the feuds are and everything, and it gives a little latitude to the code enforcement.
Yeah, I'm just.
Yeah, Brad and Nick and Norma are pretty good at, or they're very good at, you know, sifting through what's an actual enforcement issue and a real violation versus, you know, to be blunt, somebody just trying to use the town to, you know, kind of, you know, fight an argument with their neighbor. So the current staff and previous staff are pretty good about sorting through that and making sure we're handling things appropriately.
I mean, they've got that experience. Even from some of my selectmen's experience, you get involved with complaints and find out there's a neighborhood spat going on. It's not more to do about nothing, but you got to work with both parties to explain and get them calmed down so it's not a Hatfield or McCoy situation. But I mean, there are people that don't like one another and live next to each other.
I
One of
just
the
had,
unfortunate things of, population density. And,
No, no,
And, I'm
rabbits
just
are
looking at the difference
too much
between
work.
1 to 2 acres in size.
no, if you don't share your
What's
eggs
permitted
with your neighbors.
and,
then
no,
you have
no,
a problem.
Ian has the floor.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And the half acre to 1 acre lots. The half acre to 1 acre lots allows 6 poultry. And the 1 to 2 acres allows 18. So if you've got a 1.1 acre lot, that's a pretty big jump in the number of animals. Does that concern anybody else? It's just, because I have neighbors that have one acre and then 1 point something acre, and that automatically lets them have 18 versus 6.
I think that following what cooperative extension is saying is, you know, good rule of thumb numbers in sticking with this. I think also that the requirements on enclosure, the requirements that those enclosures be set back 20 feet from a property line, I don't know that there would be a real distinction if you could. I wouldn't know if I could tell the difference if there was, you know, 12 hens versus 6 hens. I feel that if you have chickens, there's going to be some level
But then
of.
it allows turkeys also.
Yes, would allow turkeys also, but,
Yeah,
and that was
that's
at the recommendation of cooperative extension that a 1 acre minimum was reasonable for the turkeys.
And it's understood that none of the poultry would be free roaming.
No
Okay.
free range.
I have a
Just a
question.
comment.
Okay, well, what I'll do, I'll go through the board anyway. Have anything else, Dan?
I'm fine,
All set,
thanks.
Jeff?
Nope, I'm all set, thank you.
Ted?
I thought last time, so your line on poultry here, I feel like some people may read it wrong and saying that, I thought we said that roosters were not going to be allowed at our last meeting.
Yep, so poultry, the definition includes roosters and geese, those are poultry, but with B4 stating that there shall be no roosters permitted. We're acknowledging that roostery is poultry, but
Thank you. I
roosters
missed
not
that.
permitted. But I think what the intent from this discussion this evening would be to add to that geese
Yes,
are also in the the
Would we be able to
prohibited list.
somehow, I guess,
Yeah.
maybe either bold or capitalize no or something, so that if people are looking through the documents and being like, oh, no roosters.
Yeah, maybe if we even just move that to the last bullet point, so no it'll stand out if that's the last
Right,
item.
it
We
kind
can-
of gets lost in the mix there.
Yep, we can look at the formatting on that,
Geese and guinea fowl.
geese and guinea fowl.
And what do you do if you believe your neighbor has a rooster?
You contact code enforcement.
Yeah, call the building inspector, code enforcement. Anything else, Ted? Lynn?
Oh, I'm all set.
Al?
All set.
Johnny?
I'm all set.
Okay.
I
Roger.
just wanted to make a little comment. It is,
Your plug for turkeys?
when you're raising chickens, you're doing that for eggs. That's probably the main thing. And then you sometimes slaughter them because they don't lay anymore. And off you go. But turkeys are mostly raised to put on the Thanksgiving table. So it's not like you're gonna have turkeys all year round. You have them spring to fall, or maybe just June to fall. They only take 3 months to get as big as they will get. And that's usually the time. Then they go in the freezer. So it's not gonna I don't think it would cause a lot of problems.
Jake,
I'm good, I think it looks good.
Yes.
the board comfortable for, we go for a public hearing on this? In April 13th?
Public hearing, probably at our second April meeting.
Yeah,
will be
yeah.
the-
13th.
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
we'll move on to groundwater protection. And,
So last month, the discussion of the board, and so back in January when we looked at this, we were looking at wellhead protection areas and the aquifer areas, which covered a significant area of town, and the sentiment of the board was, we want to protect everything. I think when we then looked at that map last month and then looked at the wording, and I think the board started to have some concerns about the impact of those restrictions on existing or potentially existing gas stations or other, bulk petroleum storage and other, prohibited uses, and had talked about wanting to have staff explore expanding or making exceptions for allowing expansion of existing nonconforming use. So under the ordinance, an existing nonconforming use is allowed to continue to operate, but by design, an existing nonconforming use was not. We don't want it to expand. So, after hearing from the board and knowing that that was a concern and wanting to preserve and potential for expansion, instead of looking at playing with that language, I reviewed the DES language and spoke to some folks at DES, and then thought that what would make more sense as a reasonable compromise as a first step on this is, rather than amending the language, I think the language has been working statewide, it's been working for DES. I think it's reasonable. Instead of amending the language to allow expansion of these prohibited uses that could have the potential of contaminating aquifer protection areas, I think an initial first step, if the board is wanting to adopt this ordinance, would be adopting the groundwater management ordinance, and it would only apply to wellhead protection areas. And the reason I think these wellhead protection areas are important and prime, and I'd be happy to argue why we shouldn't allow expansion if there were existing nonconforming uses, though right now there are not any gas stations within these yellow bubbles. I can't speak for snow dumps and other things, but on its face, it does not look like there are existing nonconforming uses. But these areas are associated with community water supply wells that people are getting their drinking water from. So they're turning on the faucet, they're getting water out of the well, out of wells that are coming from this protective radius. I think that it's really important for the town to recognize that we can take some responsibility and play a role in trying to protect and eliminate allowing expansion of uses or new uses that have the potential to contaminate these drinking water resources. So allowing new bulk petroleum storage, allowing these different, high intensity uses. It seemed to me that I think when everybody looked at the map and saw a huge area of town being covered, there was a little bit of a concern, well, how are we impacting folks? So this, to me, takes it back a step. It doesn't change and modify the state's recommended language and language that's been working. But what it still does is, we know that, John Smith lives in this house and his water is supplied from a community water supply well that has this protective well radius. We shouldn't allow a gas station in that area. So it's different from what the board had directed and talked about, allowing expansion of nonconforming uses, but I think this might be a better approach to begin to, start this and get an ordinance on the books that protects these areas that we know are impacting wells that people are turning on their faucet and drinking water from. And it lets us then also open up a public hearing, begin conversation with the community, and see if in the future there may be support for other expansion, or lets us get our feet wet with this ordinance, see how it's gonna work, and see if there's potential for expansion in the future. So I'm happy to have any discussion, take any input, answer any questions the board may have with regard to this.
Okay, I'll start with Ann. I'll go through the board again. So, Ann,
I am very concerned about the groundwater and the aquifer protection we should be having because of all the issues we're having right now with drinking water. It's townwide, seems like. So I don't think we should delay that very long after we look at this, because it's so important to everybody. It's on everybody's minds, I think. And so many sections of town are affected by it. I can see the idea of taking a first step, definitely, but we ought to be also thinking about that second step that should come with the aquifer protections, too.
yeah, it's become I think, especially with the PFAS and even well, I think a couple of years ago, there was the rollover up near Sanborn Road. That, even though, it's not a permanent establishment, but it was a, vehicle that overturned and polluted, land, and there had to be a lot of expense, which usually is borne by the carrier, so to remediate. So,
Plus, we have so much of our town is dependent on wells right now. And we don't have a plan yet about water line expansions that I know of. So we ought to seriously consider that, and I think the public would be, in support of that. Well, we can find out.
okay,
Thank you.
okay, Jeff,
And this is probably something I absolutely should know, but how are snow dumps regulated now?
It would be, if you, it would need to be on a approved site plan. It's basically would be a non-residential use, that if you were highlighting a parcel of land, that this is a piece of land that you're coming and dumping snow and stockpiling. There are none that I'm aware of in town. I think, when you look at like the city of Manchester, they have, designated snow dump areas, that for their, municipal, snow removal actions and things coming off the airport, have particular areas that are outside of the town of Londonderry. It would be acknowledging the fact that if somebody were to say on a commercial site that they are removing snow from we do often see site plans where snow storage areas are indicated on the site plan, and then if they can't keep it, they'll remove the snow off-site. Well, what's the off-site location? And the off-site location should not be in one of these wellhead protection areas.
yeah, I don't think we have any snow dump per se. I mean, they could be dumping snow, which is another code enforcement, thing,
Yeah.
or the police department. And I know on our site plans, dumping in the, detention ponds is not allowed.
Right.
Yeah, and those are,
Happen,
code enforcement gets phone calls when there is snow being dumped in, areas that are wetland areas or areas that are identified. So those are enforcement things that the building department regularly deals with.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was just kind of thinking
Yeah.
through a scenario of commercial lot
Yeah.
and
We've
need to really kind of hide my snow.
I don't know that I've ever I know that I have not in this town, but I don't know that I've seen in many other communities a site plan for a snow dump. But theoretically, that would be what they'd be doing if they were following a proper procedure.
So it's not really a huge issue with our town.
No, but it's something that we want to include in here to regulate, just as a way of making sure that if there are chlorides that are, obviously in that treated snow, that we don't want those to be, dumped in these wellhead protection areas.
usually the cities have designated
Right.
areas where, I mean, it's the municipality is doing the dumping. Like Manchester uses their old landfill to make that mountain higher.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
How's that? Ted?
I think the new map looks great. Thank you.
Linton?
So a couple of questions. Can you refresh my memory on how the size of the bubbles were established? Is it by the number of wellheads?
It's based on the volume of the well, so the gallons per day volume that well is approved for. I don't have the table in front of me. I had it earlier today. I should have printed it out. But basically, if your normal residential well has a well radius of 75 feet, and that's just based on individual, well and the gallons per day that's expected to draw. These wells, the radius could be from 100 feet to 250 feet, so to larger, depending on what that gallon per day volume is.
Okay, perfect. And then there's two bubbles. There's one up in the upper right-hand corner and one in the lower left-hand corner that touch budding towns. I assume it's like Auburn and Litchfield.
I believe Hudson,
Hudson.
or that
Hudson
could be
would be
Litchfield,
to the
yeah,
south.
Litchfield and incorrect Auburn.
Yeah, it's down in that area. where
Yeah,
they
so
all
the
meet,
well
right?
is in a different community, but we'd still be looking to protect,
So do we know if they have any protection ordinances in place like we're proposing here?
I do
or
not know,
should
but I
we
can
work
get you
with
that
them? Can
answer.
we work with them to see what they can
Yep,
do to
I
do
can
the
get you
same
that
thing?
answer.
Great. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Al,
Looks good to me. I'm all set.
Johnny,
I'm all set, but I got a question on the snow dump, actually.
Yep.
Now that you brought it up. That's not like on a site plan where you actually store the snow off of your own property.
No, it would be removal off-site. It would be taking it from your property and bringing it to another location. The stockpiling on site is just approved as part of the regular site plan review process. And so that is in the definition. So where snow is cleared from roadways and or motor vehicle parking areas and is placed for disposal. So, but I guess we can clarify in that definition that it's placed off-site.
No, I mean, I just was thinking at the time, and you said, well, it needs to be approved, and I was like, we do approve snow storage
Yep.
area on site plans.
Yep.
And so I didn't know if that was the same thing, but that would
No.
be a huge impact, because everybody needs to put their snow somewhere.
Yeah, yep, and you can keep your snow on your property. It's just if you were looking for a designated off-site area that you were dumping snow, that could not be done within the wellhead protection areas.
Okay, well set.
okay, Roger,
Excellent beginning to get it going. I think it's great, and it'll get better when we modify it in the future.
Jake,
I think it looks a lot better. I pulled up the map from the last meeting and just kind of put them side by side here.
Yeah,
Obviously, there's a huge difference between the two.
yeah, I think that this,
Yeah,
without altering the language of the state that has been working, I think at least gets,
yeah,
gets something started in the right direction, so.
yeah, I
I
agree.
appreciate all the input from the board at the last meeting. It was a good exercise for us to, think on what makes sense for the town.
because I think it is a good first step. We'll have to see how it goes. I think from some of the comments we got, I think as far as aquifer protection, we need to probably put a little more thought in with the addressing of, existing non-conforming uses.
And I
Usually,
think,
we don't want to make a, non-conforming use any more non-conforming.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, if it's
Yes.
appropriate now, I do have some comments to add to the discussion.
Certainly.
So while I'm, of course, not a hydrogeologist or anything like that, I can't speak to, the science of water moving underground, things like that. But before I came to work for Londonderry, I was a design engineer for about 15 years. Most of that time was spent in water distribution, storage, and wastewater for municipalities, working on those systems and things. And so I just wanted to share an experience that I had working on a project. It's been a few years, so forgive me if I'm fuzzy on some of the details. But there was a small community, kind of like Londonderry in Massachusetts, that, it's agricultural community, and the highway went through it. Along came, gas station off the exit and everything. Well, back, I want to say around 1985, 1990, the underground tank for this gas station must have ruptured, and it failed just a routine leakage test. So, of course, they went through and, they did everything they had to do to remove the tank. Several years later, I believe MTBE started getting found in the in the surrounding wells for everybody. And from what I can recall, it started off as 10, 15 wells, something like that. And this major petroleum company that leave nameless was our client. We ended up designing a water, about 7 miles of water main, 3 pump station, a whole water system extension because of this. But before it came to that point, I guess it was around 2000. So like almost 30 years later, 25 years later, there's decades of testing in the soils and groundwater to figure out what's going on. A lot of attempts at remediation. Ultimately, none of that really worked, and I believe Mass DEP and this company, they agreed to an administrative consent order. So they had to build this water system extension. So that happened, I want to say, I'm going to say 2016, 2017, something like that. That's when design started, and so I think finally I think it was last year, about 200 homes were connected to this water system. You know, they were associated with where the MTB had kind of spread throughout the groundwater. So I just wanted to point that out, that, you know, it took, geez, I don't know, about 30 years, maybe more, for this problem to finally, I won't call it resolved because the groundwater is still all contaminated. But, you know, they got a water system out of it, so most of these people are off their wells. But, you know, that was kind of a big issue for this small town, and thought I'd just share that with you guys, a little experience.
Getting the call. Yes, I mean, New Hampshire's had a lot of problems with MTBE getting into wells, and that's why there's a big water project running water line down, you know, I think Windham, some of Derry, into Salem, all related to MTBE, which flows with water quite well.
Apparently it's very soluble in water, and it doesn't stick to soil very well, so it moves.
It moves. I've done a lot of liquid chromatography as part of my work, and we commonly used it because you didn't want to develop a partition between the organic phase and the water soluble phase. So that was always, usually like a standard ingredient. So
And we had that problem in the old North Fire Station, tanks
yeah,
that leaked, MTBE. I don't know if some of the homes in the area are still using bottled waters or not. That was years ago, but yeah, that was a big problem.
yeah. And my wife's nephew is an environmental engineer. He works for a company, and they principally work for gasoline stations, companies. They're very busy because of leaking tanks. So he's got more than he wants to do. He does a lot of, I guess it's a national company, so he does a fair amount of traveling also where the problems are. So he's on the go constantly. So he just says, don't put the tanks in the ground. So this is a good first step, I believe. Ann has a very, very good point. And I think we have to work on that for the future. But is the board comfortable with going to a public hearing on what we have
Yes.
right now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Great. We'll schedule that for April as
It'll
well.
be scheduled for the 13th of April.
Great.
The weather will be a bit different from what we're having right now, so
Maybe.
hopefully.
We hope,
Hopefully,
fingers
yeah.
crossed.
Remember the April Fool's snowstorm, and I can remember, this goes way back, I think it was when I first met my wife. It was like, I think May 8th or something, and we had about 8 inches of wet, heavy snow.
Hey, in 2020, we got like 5 inches in May.
Yeah, that's right. Remember my grandfather saying he never saw snow in May before. So, I've seen it that once, and then again, we
2020.
had here, so.
Well, somewhere up in New Hampshire on the Woodstock area, I forget exactly. Maybe it's Lincoln. There's a monument. The year was like 1865, somewhere in that year. They had the year without a summer, where it snowed in August.
Oh,
Correct.
And this guy saved these people in this community from starving.
oh.
I don't know how, but I remember reading that story.
That was, wasn't late 1800s, a big volcanic eruption
Yeah,
in
yes,
the
yes.
South Pacific area.
Yes, there was.
And
That was it.
I think he
spewed
was
so much
raising
ash,
turkeys.
It was like,
and,
a whole cloudy summer, no sun, and
That's what did it.
Do you remember that personally?
no, I remember reading about it.
about right.
and,
Mount Tambora
Yes.
or Krakatoa, one of the two.
Krakatoa, that's it, Krakatoa. It's, how one thing can change the climate. Okay. We have any other business? I don't have anything else on the agenda. That's right in front of me too.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, I have a motion to
Second.
adjourn, second by Jake. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned, folks.